Here is Eva Chipik. Let's talk, and there's a lot to get to, so let's get right to it. Eva Chipik is talking about the big win in Alberta. She says, major victory in Alberta. This was supposed to be on the show yesterday, the first, but the link didn't work for whatever reason, so I don't know why, but there's a lot more story to this. Yesterday, this was the only link I had. Now there's a lot more story to this, and so I'm kind of glad I had to wait till today to talk to you about it, because it's much more robust today. Eva says the COVID-19 pandemic orders under Dr. Hinshaw were found to be ultra vires, i.e. illegally enacted. That's what ultra vires means. Under Section 29 of the Public Health Act, the final decision makers were the cabinet and committees of cabinet rather than Dr. Hinshaw or one of her statutory authorized delegates. So it was the politicians who made this decision, not the medical health officer. Eva continues. 1, this application involves challenges to certain orders enacted by the Chief Medical Officer of Health. And she's going to go through this. I'm not going to read her tweets here because I've got some other things that I want to read to you. Here is Carl. He's kind of giving a shorter overview than Eva's, so I'll read a little bit of this. And then we're going to hear directly from the guys who I think that were litigating it themselves and the explanation of what's happened here. It's a little bit long, medium long, but I think it's totally worth it. So here's an overview from Carl. He says, this is from a leading lawyer today in BC. Some hope, it seems. I think this is a big win. The judge commented on the constitutionality of the actions of Dina Hinshaw over the objections of the plaintiff lawyers. There is Supreme Court of Canada authority saying that if the court can resolve the matter without resorting to a constitutional analysis, it should do so, and it should refrain from commenting on the constitutional analysis. The lawyers argued for this, but the judge ignored it and basically praised Hinshaw for her efforts to blame Premier Kenney and his cabinet committees. However, she still concluded that the public health orders in Alberta were directed or essentially made by the politicians and not the public health officer, which was ultra vires, or illegal, as it was contrary to the Public Health Act. Dr. Henry in British Columbia wrote a book in 2020 where she said that she was doing what she was told by Adrian Dix and John Horgan. She said that if she strayed from their directives, that she would likely be fired. Our Public Health Act reads similarly to the Alberta Act, and I think the same argument can be made. In Alberta, Dina Hinshaw admitted under cross-examination that she was just doing what she was told. This resulted in the lawyers being able to get copies of the communications between herself and Premier Kenney and his cabinet, which proved that they were the ones making the decisions. I suspect the same is true in British Columbia, and all of the public health orders in BC are also illegal, which will open up the door for lawsuits for everyone who's impacted by the mandates. TikTok, everyone. Thank goodness also that they were so arrogant that they were correct in what they were doing, and so arrogant to structure it in the way that they did to protect the public health officer from public scorn. They said, no, it was the politicians, and they said it in writing. So they screwed themselves. They totally screwed themselves. And it's hilarious. And I'll show you the lawyers celebrating this in a minute and showing you exactly how that played out, because I think it's important. I do think this is huge. We just have to hope that the Alberta Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of Canada do not overturn this decision. The Achilles heel. The judge's comments about the Constitution should not have been made and are what we call obiter. Sorry if I'm getting that wrong. OBITER. I'm probably saying it medium right. The judge seemed to bend over backwards to try and get this in, but she still struck down all the public health orders. So it's interesting to me. This is a medium long clip. I think I'm going to play like 2 minutes of this, but I think it's worthwhile. These are Leighton Gray and Jeffrey R.W. Rath, Christopher Scott, and Carrie Lambert, and these guys have been involved in this. Carrie Lambert is shouting out to the Coots 4. He's wearing a Coots 4 t-shirt. So the Coots 4 should not be in jail without bail, without charges, without... shouldn't you have a trial in a reasonable amount of time? Almost 2 years is not a reasonable amount of time. These guys' lives have been destroyed by this. And all the evidence, from what I've heard, is the police saying that this is what they did. So isn't that hearsay? Anyway, regardless, the Coots 4 are kind of represented here. So here we go.
People will say, what does that really mean? Like, what was the Ingram case, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's Jeff. There he is.
Hey, Jeff. Looking good. Before we get going, I want to show everybody I've got my APP sweatshirt on.
Oh, it looks very good. So very nice.
We're in the team colors.
Everyone should be wearing that. And I might as well
support. Are we still on the air?
Yeah. I've got Save the Coots Boys shirt on too, which we may end up talking a little bit about that, but let's don't steal the thunder of this one, because this is huge. This is huge.
Yeah. Go ahead. You want to explain about what the case is all about?
Yeah. Well, both myself and my good friend, Mr. Gray, represented clients who were challenging the legality of all of the ridiculous Hinshaw orders that were bedeviling this province, for the last number of, throughout the pandemic. Like brilliant things like telling us how many friends we're allowed to have, closing down otherwise viable businesses and putting, people out of work and bankrupting businesses. What were some of the other really stupid orders that were issued?
Telling closure of churches and closure of businesses like Rebecca Ingram's.
Closing down businesses like Rebecca's, shutting down churches, all of the horrible human rights abuses that we all suffered, throughout the pandemic. Well, Justice Romaine of the Court of King's Bench has ruled that every single one of those silly orders was illegal. Every one of those orders was against the law. Wow. The fancy Latin phrase that's used is to say that the orders were ultra vires, Section 29 of the Public Health Act, which is what Rebecca Ingram has been arguing from day one, which is to say that every single order issued by Dina Hinshaw was in fact illegal. So
every order.
What's that? Every single order that was issued by Dina Hinshaw was illegal because she was not making the decisions as the chief medical officer of health. She was deferring her delegated authority to cabinet and in effect having cabinet make the decisions. She would go into cabinet with, in effect, what we referred to in court as a cocktail menu because she was dealing with the cocktail cabinet. And she'd go in with a list of cocktails, and the cabinet would simply select from the drinks menu as to what it was that they wanted her to do, and then they would decide and they would tell her what to do. Well, that's not legal under the terms of the Public Health Act, and that was what we were arguing from day one on behalf of Rebecca Ingram, was that every single one of those orders was illegal. Now, remarkably, and I guess it was almost a year ago now, Justice Dunlop, in a case called CM, came to that very same conclusion. And that was a case where a couple of lawyers who, quite frankly, shot themselves and their clients in the foot, they were acting on behalf of the teachers union, trying to get an order to order all of our children to be remasked in schools. And one of their arguments was effectively the same argument that I was making, except from the horrible anti-freedom side, which was, that order, unmasking kids at school can't be legal because cabinet made that order and Dina Hinshaw didn't make that order. So we want that order struck down on the basis that it's illegal. And I'm sure
Thank you, Gil McGowan.
What's that?
I said, thank you, Gil McGowan, for bringing the whole thing down for us.
Oh, no. So I'm sure Justice Dunlop was snickering into the sleeve of his robe when he said, is that really what you want? Here, let me grant that to you. Let me get out my magic fairy wand, and I'll declare that order to be illegal on the basis that Dina Hinshaw didn't make that order and the order was made by cabinet. I, to this day, cannot believe that Justice Dunlop made that decision and made that order without knowing the implications of it for every single other order issued by Dina Hinshaw throughout the pandemic. Right?
So boom. So do you they set precedent and they did that. They did that to themselves. And the lawyer for the other side set that precedent, got that ball rolling, and won these guys this case, essentially, and proved that, or helped them prove that the orders didn't come from Hinshaw. They, in fact, came from the cabinet. So the cabinet was always acting as a de facto medical guide, and just, he said, as if ordering from a cocktail menu, which ones do you want, right? Dina Hinshaw enact whatever you want. Here's your options. Justice Center for the Constitutional Freedoms says the Justice Center is pleased with the Court of King's Bench decision to invalidate the public health orders of Dr. Dina Hinshaw in Ingram versus Alberta. The court struck down lockdown measures, saying they were issued by cabinet rather than the CMOH. So if the lockdown measures were struck down, does that underpinned and her orders underpinned everything else in Alberta, right? All the rest of it. So will legal decisions and things like that start getting undone? What about Arthur Pawlowski? What about all of the pastors and the churches that were targeted under these illegal orders, right? There's a lot of things to legislate, and it was all illegal. All of it. And I mean, we knew it. Of course we knew it. Of course it was illegal. Of course they can't do this. Obviously, right? But here we are, right? And it's going to take time for this to litigate out, but are we going to see consequences? Are we going to see jail time for people like mayors, for people like public health? I think at this point in time, and things may change, and I hope things do change, but at this point in time, Canadians don't typically do that. And the defense of they were doing their best with the information they had, and we believe there was an emergency, and so there was an emergency, that's going to be okay until it's not okay. It seems like that would fly, but I don't think it would last. And the reason I don't think it would last is because I think there are health impacts, and there are people who have been impacted, like Sean's dad, right? Who has a heavy loss. And there's going to be people like that who are going to push for that's not okay. Doing your best and firing people, doing your best with the information you had, but running Black Lives Matter, doing your best. Like there's a lot of, you were doing your best, but also you were kind of teabagging people who weren't listening, right? Like you were kind of being jerks. You were making it seem like if you didn't listen, you were putting people at risk. Newspapers to this day, this morning I asked the National Post if they had legal, they were talking about, there's a fly in front of me and I don't want to. Anyway, the National Post is talking about you should get boosted, blah, 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 blah. And I said, do you have the legal cover to deal with people coming after you for liability of people who've read your article and go get boosted and end up with blood clots or myocarditis? What insanity are we living through at this point in time? Because it is insane. Eva Chippick again says, to those saying this decision is not a victory, one, the court recognizes it was enacted, the orders were enacted without proper legal authority. Two, people are recognizing other problems in our establishment that need to be addressed. Ensuring that government actually works for the public requires informed, organized, and active participation. It's on you to be an active citizen, not a hero to swoop in magically fix everything. The work of holding the government to account has just started. Question is, what are you doing to hold the government to account? Good question. One of the things I did want to highlight is number 5. This is Eva Chippick explaining about the charter, and this is what the judge said. While she invalidated Hinshaw's orders, this is what she said about the charter. However, the impunged orders have been validly enacted. However, had the impunged orders by Hinshaw been validly enacted by the medical health officer, they would not have been unconstitutional. While they may have infringed certain of the applicant's rights under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, begins Schedule B of the Canadian Act 1982, C11, and the Alberta Bill of Rights, RSA 2000, blah, blah, blah. These limitations were amply and demonstrably justified as reasonable limits in a free and democratic society pursuant to Section 1 of the Charter, and they were enacted pursuant to a valid legislative purpose. There's no Oakes test. There hasn't been an Oakes test. And the Oakes test is, it has to be proportional. It has to be related. Like you can't say you have to eat 100 pineapples. And the reason we're doing this is to stop speeding. Like somebody's going to say like, listen, dude, that may make me go to the bathroom. And so I will stop driving as fast when I start driving. But if I have to go to the bathroom, I'm going to drive faster. Like, I don't know. 100 pineapples has nothing to do with speeding, nothing at all to do with speeding. So it has to be, the law has to have something to do with the thing that you're trying to fix, right? You can't make a pineapple law for speeding. It doesn't work like that. And so the judge is saying that it's constitutional, but the test we have to test whether it's constitutional has not been applied to any of these things. And so it's not constitutional. And like, they can say, oh, it's constitutional all they want. They can say it's constitutional till they're blue in the face, until I see an Oakes test that is valid, that actually takes into account the things that are supposed to be taken into account with such a test. Then I reject their conclusion of it's constitutional, because they're lying, as they're lying about so many other things. Gray says, a big win for freedom. Today, an Alberta judge ruled that public health orders were enforced during the pandemic, violated charter freedoms. This is a major victory and could cause ripple effects across the country. He got it wrong. Like, he's getting it wrong, but he wants it to be true so much. He's responding to this, right? And somebody says, that's not what happened. He said the legislation was declared invalid, but the court decision does not say that the health measures violated charter rights. In fact, it says the opposite, I'm afraid. But it doesn't support it. which is just infuriating. It's just infuriating. It's like having an argument with somebody. And when you have an argument with somebody, you say, I posit this. And they say, I disagree with you, sir. And then you have to prove this or they disprove this, right? And that's an argument. And you can have an argument with somebody in a very civil and good way. You don't have to like yell at them and hit them and things like that. You can have a nice, argument where you're just, battling with wits and proof and blah, 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 blah. And that is a perfectly acceptable explanation. If you have an argument and we focus on the thing at hand and you say, this is my proof for that. And the person who's against or for whatever it is on the counter side says, this is my proof of my side. And then you have a reasonable conclusion at the end. But instead, what's happening is they're saying it's constitutional. And we say, where's the test? And they say, stop asking racist questions. And that's a problem. That's the problem, right? Right there's the problem. That's the crux of it. So we can have an argument, but we haven't had an argument. They can't win the argument. And so they do everything to shut down the argument. That's part of the modus operandi. That's how they maintain power and still maintain power. Pretty wild. Muriel says, no kidding. Okay, so this is a Daily Mail article, and it says, COVID lockdowns had catastrophic impact on children's social skills. Holy cow. We masked children for 8 hours a day. Could you imagine? Like, that's torturous. Why would you do that to people? Why would you let other people do that to you, right? Like, holy smoke, hashtag never again. So this is not a revelation for any thinking person, right? COVID lockdowns had catastrophic impact on children's social skills. Shocker. Tell me something I didn't know, right? Water's wet and all that. Sky's up and all that. So it's ridiculous. Of course it did. Of course it did. We did that to our children. Why are we tolerating that? And why are we not trying to ensure that that does not happen again? Right? It's very interesting. Here's Disclosed TV. Pfizer reports a bigger than expected 54% decline in second quarter revenue. Why does Pfizer make any money at all with the blood clots and the heart attacks that are harming people across the world, right? What's the increase in death rate at this point in time? Even if you say safe and effective, right? I don't believe you. And I don't think we have the evidence to back it up. And so it's really interesting that the governments, newspapers, everybody is still pushing all of this. Very, very interesting indeed. What's going to happen? I think payouts, probably. I think at some point they're going to legislate. They're going to go after public health. They're going to go after the people who did this. I think it's going to take years. I think it's going to take... I think it's going to take so long that it's going to be like the 9/11 inquiry, right? Like in 2013 or 14, somebody was saying, no, they still don't have enough money. You know what I mean? Like it's... What really happened? What really happened? And the whole point of the inquiry is to take control of the narrative and to kind of shaft the people who got screwed. So they get doubly screwed. I think that's what's going to happen. So crappy, but there we are. That's the realistic view of how things have happened in the past. And I can't tell you what's going to happen in the future. All I can tell you is what happened in the past. And what happened in the past is nobody gets satisfactory justice. I can't name one time. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful